On June 10th of 2016, Rooster Teeth introduced the world to one of their newest shows, that show being called... Created by Jordan Swears and Miles Luna, Camp Camp is an adult animated show about a boy being forced to go to summer camp named Max. Despite him hating the camp though, he tries to make it work by causing as much trouble as possible for his counselors, Gwen and David, usually doing this chaos with his friends Neil and Nikki, which makes for a pretty cool premise. And so many people around the world thought the same, as season 1 of Camp Camp was received incredibly well, to the point where Camp Camp would go on to have 5 seasons in its entire catalog, with audiences really digging it, except for season 5. We will talk about season 5 later, don't you worry. Despite Camp Camp having a remarkably successful run, unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond its control, it was left in limbo midway through its 5th season. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about all the Camp Camp seasons, the external things that led to its decline, not in quality by the way, and things that were happening to the show behind the scenes. But before we get into it, allow me to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Beitel, and I enjoy discussing animated content on this channel. So, what suddenly enticed me to make a video about Camp Camp in 2025? Well, I used to be a fan of Camp Camp all the way back in 2017. I used to interact a lot with the fan content and even had a Camp Camp shirt that I got from Hot Topic. God, I was cringe. Unfortunately, after season 3 came out, I dropped it due to things that Rooster Teeth had done to it. And also, I was just getting into other interests at the time. But suddenly, in modern day, I had a spur of nostalgia for Camp Camp. So, I binge-watched all 5 seasons. It was an insane thing to do, but hey, it was worth it for this video. Anyways, how do I transition this? Make sure to get some snacks, sit back and relax, and let's go back in time into the world of Camp Camp. For the sake of simplicity, this video will be put into different sections. The first one will obviously be about seasons 1 to 2, because in my opinion, that's when Camp Camp was at its peak. Section 2 will be about seasons 3 to 4, since I'm pretty mixed on those seasons. Thirdly, we will talk about season 5, and finally, I will talk about the behind the scenes that led to Camp Camp's current situation. There will also be some bonus sections here and there, and obviously they're going to be put into chapters, so if you do want to skip those, just know that you can always move to the next section if you like. Okay, just giving a heads up. Okie dokie, let's get into it. Season 1 obviously introduces the audience to the main premise. However, to get more into detail, Max is going to a summer camp called Camp Campbell, named after its founder, Cameron Campbell. The camp has a little bit of everything. There is science camp, space camp, magic camp, art camp, you get the point. You could say it's a camp. This is also where we get introduced to the 2 other troublemakers that I mentioned in the beginning, Nikki and Neil, which makes for the iconic trio we all know and love. And then the 2 main camp counselors, Gwen and David. There are also other background characters, such as Harrison the Magic Kid, Space Kid, Nerf, who is the bully, Preston the Theater Kid, Neris the Wizard, and Arid, who is the cool one. And finally, you have Dolph, who is the art camper. Yeah. There's also the quartermaster, who does most of the tasks at camp. And finally, you have the Cameron Campbell, who is a father figure / role model to David for obvious reasons. And you know, despite this show having a huge cast of characters, all of them are written super well and have really fun and hilarious dynamics that make for cool moments. It also helps that each character is unique. For example, my favorite dynamic throughout the entire series has to be between Max and David. Throughout this season, we see that Max is very negative and cynical, and he hates everything, especially Camp Campbell. So he will cause chaos whenever he can. He also loves to emotionally torture people, especially David. For example, in Romeo and Juliet 2, Love Resurrected, Max steals David's phone to mess with his Tinder account and his chances at romance. Jesus Christ. David is far more optimistic and whimsical than Max, and loves to see the best in everything and everyone, especially at Camp Campbell. So he will do anything in his power to make the campers happy, and even try to keep the camp going strong despite limitations. He even looks up a lot to Mr. Campbell, despite him always being gone to go on his adventures, you could say. He's also pretty oblivious, which makes for some hilarious scenes and moments with him. For example, in David Gets Hard, yes, that's the name of the episode. No need to question it. In that episode, he encourages himself to become a tougher person so he can discipline Nerf, but his wording is not the best.
I can't do this alone, which means you've got to pull yourself together!
Gosh darn it, you're right, Gwen. Today's the day I get hard.
Okay, maybe we don't phrase it like that.
Oh no, rule 1, no backing down. Look out, world, I'm hard and I'm coming. Whether he likes it or not, Nerf is gonna let me in. Owie.
These personalities that Max and David have clash really well with one another, as we see Max failed attempts at limiting David's optimism and David's own failed attempts at trying to make Max more optimistic, making for some pretty good written conflicts. Another dynamic I also enjoy is Nikki, Niels, and Max's friendship. Nikki was supposed to go to adventure camp, so obviously she's the most adventurous and reckless of the three, and that recklessness often leads to danger. Neil, on the other hand, is the nerd of the group, since he was supposed to go to science camp. He's much more reserved, neurotic, and quite awkward. But when he gets angry, he really gets angry, especially when it has to do with his interest or friends. It's exactly why he became friends with Max when he saw that the camp he went to was a scam. Max's negative but smart attitude, Nikki's adventurous and chaotic attitude, and Neil's nerdy yet passionate attitude all make for some great chaos for them to have at the camp. And we also see the different shenanigans they all get into because of their personalities. I'm not going to get into it now, but their friendship does develop in the later seasons. But in the case of season 1, Max doesn't seem to care for them emotionally. And that's all I'm going to say. These characters are pretty cool, right? But what type of humor does Camp have? Well, for starters, there is slapstick humor, which, by the way, is done incredibly well. It's not like modern-day Family Guy levels of, oh my god, the character is going through torture, and it's gory. This is funny, guys! No. Instead, the slapstick humor has context that helps make the character going through something hurtful funny. What also helps with the slapstick is that Camp likes to exaggerate the personalities of its characters, making the scenarios 10 times more hilarious. One of my favorite examples comes from an episode called Mind Freakers. Oh my god, these episode titles are so bad out of context. In this episode, Harrison does a magic trick that Neil can't scientifically figure out how it's done. The magic trick is making a person randomly throw up a bunch of objects. Due to his desire of always wanting to be right and prove that magic isn't real, this causes him to tweak out about it. So he puts a bunch of stuff into Nikki's mouth to prove his point. But this causes Nikki to start choking on the objects, causing her to almost die. Like, yeah, the stuff this show would do was insane, but it was well written and thought out. Another type of humor that Camp had was dark humor. Oh boy. here we go. So 2016, as we all know, was a different era. So media could get away with some pretty offensive shit. And often some of that stuff has aged well, while others have not. A good example of Camp doing good dark humor is in the last episode of season 1, The Order of the Sparrow. In this episode, David dresses up as a stereotypical Native American chief. What makes this scene funny is that David sees it as just another silly camp tradition, and he's just completely ignorant about it, with Max even calling him out for it because of how, well, racist it is, but he continues to ignore it for the sake of the camp. Another good example of Camp doing good dark humor is episode 6, Raining Day, where Dolph tries to turn the camp into a mini dictatorship because David assigned him as a counselor for the day. You know, he does your typical dictator things, such as prohibiting the mixing of colors when the campers are doing a coloring activity. It's quite obvious that throughout the episode, Dolph is trying to be the bad German man from World War II, without even realizing it, as that was one of the jokes Dolph had throughout the entire series. But what makes the comedy very funny in this episode is that they never say it out loud until the ending, giving it a pretty good effect. Also, in the same episode, David is trying to impress the camp critic committee so he can win the Counselor of the Year award, but funnily enough, Dolph ends up winning it. I mean, I don't know what David expected. These motherfuckers look creepy as shit. A bad example of Camp doing dark humor is... oh my god, I can't believe this is a real character. So does anyone remember Bonquisha? Oh my god. Well, she was introduced in season 1, episode 7. Like I said at the start, Max does a Tinder prank on David and makes her come to camp. I'll just let her character speak for herself.
Excuse me, sugar. You owe Bonquisha a date.
But that wasn't...
Nuh-uh, somebody's going out with Bonquisha, one way or another.
Who the hell is this hoe? Wait, who are you?
Don't you who are you me, David? You call yourself a conquistador? I thought we had meaningful text.
This character was clearly only made to be a stereotype of black women, and it just makes her so annoying because she doesn't subvert expectations, something this show often does for comedic effect, especially when it comes with stereotypes. But no, it's just a racist stereotype with no substance, and she can be very annoying. Thank God she was only in like 2 episodes tops because holy shit, she is awful. But comedy wasn't the only appeal Camp had. Remember when I mentioned Camp subverted expectations? Well, it didn't just do it comedically. Camp does a good job at this when it comes to developing characters. By the end of season 1, you get attached to all of these characters and start to see hints that there is more to their personalities. I.e., there is more to David than just his happy-go-lucky attitude. As I mentioned before, David tries to keep up a camp tradition in the last episode of season 1, despite no one else caring. He tries to light up a bonfire, but the rain comes pouring down, and no one else seems to care about it but him. Max gives him a hard talk on how much the world has changed, to the point where no one cares about summer camp as much as they used to, and that he should just give up. But it's here that we see that David is fully aware of these things. He's fully aware that the world has changed, that no one cares, but he still wants to continue and try because, as he says,
because somebody fucking has to.
This scene is one of the best things to come from Camp. Not only is the dialogue pretty hardcore, but we get a big reveal from David himself, and the line delivery was done beautifully. It also helps that afterwards, there are just a few seconds of silence. Max looks at him with concern and empathy, as we now also see that Max isn't the hardcore kid that we thought he was. He has a soft side too. 2, especially for David, because after this, he helps with the activity with the other campers, and they dress up as actual Indians, which is just so fucking hilarious, dude. Oh my god. And that's pretty much a summary of how season 1 introduces us to Camp Camp, a comedy show about a f***up summer camp with simple characters that have more to them under the surface. What a very peak show. Now, the peakness of Camp Camp did not end at season 1. It would continue to season 2, since the writers finally had a better grasp of the characters, comedy, and just the overall gist of things. You can clearly see all of that talent shine in season 2. I would even say that season 2 is way better than season 1, especially since season 2 started with one of my favorite episodes in the entire series, that episode being Cold Camp. It should not be underestimated how Cold Camp not only gave season 2 a strong beginning, but also made Camp Camp explode in popularity. In Cold Camp, David hires a counselor named Daniel, who is quite literally a carbon copy of him. But of course, since it's Camp Camp, Daniel is not all that he seems. As it turns out, he is a cultist. So he converts the camp to his ideology by making a purification sauna. However, though, despite all the evidence that he's a cult leader, David does not seem to notice at all, because he likes his personality so much. So Max pits David against Daniel, telling him that he's so much better than him, leading him to get purposefully converted so that David can do something about him. And he does, in the form of a song. A song that is a fucking bop. Better Than You is one of the best things to come from the Camp Camp soundtrack. I wish I could play it here, but due to copyright, I can't. What I can do, though, is tell you how much this song affected the show. As I said before, this episode made Camp Camp explode in popularity in 2017. One of the factors for that was this song. People were hearing this song throughout the entire internet at the time. This led to people making covers, fan art of the two, and even animatics. Heck, this song is still so popular that I even find animatics made from a year ago that use this song. So yeah, till this very day, Better Than You is very popular, and it's the song that usually helps people remember this show nowadays. And Better Than You wasn't the only thing in the Camp Camp soundtrack, as there was also other music made for the show at the time. Actually, fuck it, I'm just gonna make a bonus section about the Camp Camp soundtrack. So, at the time, Camp Camp had someone who made rap songs for the credits. All of those rap songs were made by Richie Branson. These songs are also really good. As I type this script, I'm most likely listening to a credit song made by Richie in the background, because he is very talented. His main genre consists mainly of nerdcore. Additionally, the dude is very good at writing lyrics, with the lyrics often having amazing rhymes and even being on point with what the episode was about. Nowadays, Richie still makes music for his YouTube channel, and tends to make lo-fi raps. I highly recommend listening to his stuff because it is very good. Now, sadly, most of the Camp Camp soundtrack is just out there nowadays through archives, so unfortunately, if you still want to listen to the soundtrack, you need to go digging for it through YouTube channels or other sites. And don't worry, I will be getting into why that happened a bit later. Alrighty then. Bonus section over. Let's go back to talking about season 2. While Cold Camp was the fan favorite, people loved the entirety of season 2, including myself. Yeah, I genuinely don't have a least favorite episode when it comes to season 2. Heck, even though Bonjour Bonquisha has this atrocious character, I still really liked this episode because it had more of a focus on the campers and David. Just so I don't ramble on, I will name my top 3 favorite episodes, and then we will talk about another highlight of season 2. At number 1, we have Egg Benefits, where the campers take care of Cameron's illegal I mean, they're tasked to babysit some platypus eggs, and each one takes it a little too far with their parenting styles, as we see everyone's personalities truly become exaggerated for comedic effect. And it's done successfully. This episode also foreshadows something about Max's character, so ooh, it's extra special! At number 2, we have Cooking Cookies, which is a Flower Scouts focused episode. The Flower Scouts are such funny characters, by the way. They are your typical sassy and preppy girls, but we see how far they will go to stay on top. Like in this episode, the girls find out that if they sell the most cookies in the country, they get a free trip to Cabo, but their sales aren't doing so hot, so they use a secret ingredient to get more customers to buy cookies. And the secret ingredient is... It's quite literally just meth. But they don't know that. They just see it as Mexican cane sugar, because that's what their garden mother told them. This leads to the girls making a whole drug business with cookies, to the point where they are taking away money from the cartels. Oh my god, this show is so amazing. So they confront the cartels by actually going to Cabo, and once they find out that Cabo is in Mexico, they don't want to go there anymore, because Mexico is too poor for them. At 3, we have Jeremy Farts. David makes a bet with the Wood Scouts. The Wood Scouts bet that the entirety of Camp Campbell can't go 24 hours without being mean, so everyone is forced to be nice for the entire day. Making matters even worse is that a new camper comes in named Jeremy Farts, and he is disgusting and weird, making the situation even harder for the campers. To be honest, you would think an episode like this would be predictable, but it actually wasn't. In the beginning, you would think Max would make the camp lose this bet, but it's David who does it, making it super ironic. And that's my top 3 favorites from this season. Now let's talk about that other episode I mentioned before, the other highlight of season 2. One that also put a mark in the entirety of Camp, and even gave season 2 a good ending. That episode being called Parents' Day. This is one of Camp's most gut-wrenching episodes, and you're about to see why. Okay, let me summarize. David makes a Parents' Day for Camp Campbell. Unfortunately, this is the same day Cameron comes back again, because he was totally not doing illegal stuff in Russia. So Cameron panics, because he doesn't want the parents to find out that he basically scammed them. But it's too late, because the parents have arrived. So now everything has to go smoothly, because the future of the camp pretty much depends on it. Throughout the entire episode, we see everyone's parents and family members, except for Max's. Since Max's parents haven't arrived yet, Cameron tasks Gwen and David to act like his parents for the entire day, so the event can go well. But this time, Max is acting meaner than usual. Max is always terrible, of course, but this time, he isn't holding himself back with his attitude as much. He's much more irritable and angrier, and David becomes more forceful with his kindness, and takes the dad routine far too seriously than he should. The camp does one final activity for Parents' Day, where every camper shows off what they have learned at camp to their families. Max hopes all of their routines will fail, but all of them end up with touching endings. Max just gets more furious, and David just keeps forcing Max to show off his routine and figure out what his parents even signed him up for. But he's not getting the memo that he doesn't want to do this. Gwen finds the papers, and David snaps at Max for being awful the entire day. However, David finally opens Max's folder, and well...
I told you, I didn't care. Just make something up so we can get this over with.
Max, I didn't know.
Max was abandoned. His parents did not care for him at all, so they just ditched him at summer camp without a second thought. David has a choice. Does he force Max to do a routine to make his biggest idol, the Cameron Campbell, happy? Or will he let Max be and take into consideration his emotions? Knowing David, we know which one he chose.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Davy, Gladys, and... What the what?
Gwen and David take Max to a pizzeria to cheer him up, and we get a heartwarming dialogue from David. He explains to Max that he feels sorry that he has neglectful parents, but despite that fact, he hopes Max can find happiness at camp one day. And also, the episode ends with Cameron getting arrested, and that's the episode. As you can see, this episode was quite emotional, and it had amazing development for both Max and David. And now, we as the audience finally understand why Max is the way he is. He uses his mean personality to hide the fact that he's hurting inside, and he's just mean to others because he's avoiding attachment, even though he has a soft spot, whether he wants to admit it or not. Because in the same episode, he gives David a 1-second thank you hug. In the case of David, he becomes more understanding of why Max is the way he is. Despite David seeing the good and jolliness of everything, he knows that it's not okay to just pretend that things are fine and dandy when they aren't. Another thing too is that David is now more patient with Max and comprehends that for Max, it's going to take a while for him to be truly happy. God, I fucking love this episode. When I watched this for the first time, I got teary-eyed, and even as I rewatched the entire series for this video, this episode still pulled on my heartstrings with just how amazing these emotional scenes are done. For example, when Max, Gwen, and David go to the pizzeria, there is no background music, just David giving his dialogue, which adds more emotion to the scene. I wish I could talk about this episode more, but this is a Camp retrospective video, not a Parents' Day video. So why don't we just move on to what I consider to be the mixed era of Camp. So I just want to say this. Season 3 and 4 are not bad seasons. In fact, they are really good. Just not amazing. Just to preface this, Camp never fell off in its 3rd or 4th seasons. It did fall off in its 5th, but that's for later. The clever writing, comedy, and even good characterization continued. However, the reason why I have these marked as the mixed era is because despite the show continuing with that good stuff, these seasons have episodes that are not that good at times. This isn't to discredit the other episodes that are amazing, it's just sadly some of the episodes in these seasons became predictable, somewhat boring, and even had slow pacing that did not help them. Let's just start with Season 3 to show you what I'm talking about. Season 3's first episode was somewhat of a warning sign for how things would continue. Unlike Season 2, Season 3 did not have that strong of a beginning. The first episode of Season 3 is called The Fundraiser. Gwen and David find out that the funding for the camp has completely run out due to Cameron's arrest. So they steal the quartermaster's hook and task the campers to find ways to fundraise a new hook for the quartermaster. But in actuality, they just need more money. This episode's beginning is okay. It's not bad, but it's not amazing either. Don't get me wrong though, throughout the entire episode we see the different scenarios the characters get up to just to raise money. For example, Preston makes a TV ad on how the kids are being neglected at camp, not realizing how bad it makes Camp Campbell look. Or how Neil comes up with the great idea to make his cryptocurrency called Neil Bucks. I mean, all of these things are in character for these guys, but it doesn't help that the episode goes kinda slow. Things get way better in the ending though, as Max exposes David and Gwen for stealing the quartermaster's hook, leading to the quartermaster to beat them the fuck up and for Max to make a profit off their suffering. Now that ending felt like the classic camp for sure, but as you saw, the episode kinda has its ups and downs, and this is a pattern that season 3 goes through with all of its episodes. For example, an amazing episode in season 3 is episode 4, Nikki's Last Day on Earth. In this episode, Nikki drinks an experimental tonic that Neil created, and she begins to get weird tummy aches. This leads her to get diagnosed with death by Dolph, so everyone does things for her to make her last day of life the best day possible. This episode is remarkable because it shows the extreme measures the campers take for Nikki in their own ways. For example, since Nerf, the bully, has now developed a softer personality up to this point, he ends up making her an amazing last day meal, or Neris makes her a princess for a day. It's a pretty funny episode, especially since the ending makes the entire thing even more hilarious, with Nikki finding out that in fact she isn't dying, but instead she's on her period, which is such a classic camp thing to do. An example of what I think is a mid-episode in season 3 is episode 10, Operation Charlie Tango Foxtrot. In this episode, the Wood Scouts get tangled up literally, in their attempt to take over Camp Campbell. And the entire episode is just each Wood Scout talking about how they got into the situation from their perspectives, which I thought was pretty boring. Look, I love the Wood Scouts, since their comedy comes from the fact that despite their camp being tough and militant, they sure don't act like it. Which is why I wish this episode was more about them attempting to take over the camp, instead of explaining what happened, since it would have been much funnier to see how each failed despite their ambition, but that's just me, I guess. A common pattern we have now been seeing with each camp season is how each one will have an emotional episode to end with, and season 3 was no exception. The last episode of season 3, Camp Corp, was just kinda as good as the other emotional endings. Just like the other final episodes from the other seasons, this one also gives Max more character and development. In this episode, Camp Campbell is sold off to Camp Corp due to the lack of funds, so everyone is split up into the different summer camps they were originally intended to go to. Nikki and Neil don't want to leave because they love the chaotic adventures they went on with Max. But Max doesn't seem to be sad. Instead, he tells Neil and Nikki that they were only temporary friends at best. This causes Nikki and Neil to get sad and leave, since it seems that the friendship they had formed meant nothing to Max. But of course, knowing Max, he does care. Throughout the entire episode, we see how Max feels sad about everything. He misses everyone, whether he wants to admit it or not. To make things quicker, he stumbles upon Cameron Campbell and asks him to get Camp Campbell back, especially since Cameron has some personal beef with Camp Corp, since according to him, the founders betrayed him. So Gwen, David, Max, and Cameron all work together to get the original campers back, so they can get the Camp Campbell that they love. Neil and Nikki, however, are not as easy to win over compared to the other campers. But unsurprisingly, Cameron betrays everyone. And of course, it turns out that the founders did not betray him, but he was kicked out of the team due to him being too greedy. It's here that Max realizes the person he could become if he pushes people too far and becomes a selfish person. So he apologizes to Nikki and Neil and admits that he did all of this because he missed everyone and just wanted to have his friends back. The talk ends with the gang hugging and Cameron driving away. There's a plot twist though, as Cameron turns himself in the ending, but instead of being taken to jail, he's forced to do community service at Camp Campbell under David, making Cameron a prominent character for season 4. Just like I mentioned, this episode was kinda good. Yes, the emotional scenes in this episode will hit you in the feels, but not completely. Compared to the other emotional endings in the other seasons, this one did not hit the right marks for me. This is due to the fact that, unlike those episodes, this one did not do a good job of taking in the environment. When we find out that Max was abandoned in season 2, the animators do a good job of setting the scene by placing Max in the shadows, and what made it special was the dialogue, which required no background music. There was no need for the sad music in the background. The dialogue between Max, Neil, and Nikki was already strong enough, but overall, it's pretty good. Not amazing, but good, just like the rest of the season. Before we talk about season 4, I want to have a bonus section about the Camp specials, because trust me, they are going to be important for the season 4 section. Starting in season 2, Camp began to create specials for each season. Usually, these were holiday specials for Halloween or Christmas. There isn't much to say about them, to be honest. Like, the season 2 and 3 specials were pretty amazing, but season 4's was, we will get into that later. I bring up these specials because I have a favorite one. That one being the Halloween special for season 3, Arrival of the Torso Takers. In this special, Max, Neil, and Nikki watch a horror movie and get caught by David. But something is off about David. He's acting super creepy and is not his usual self. This leads Max to believe that David has been taken over by some creature that wants to eat them all, but the truth is far darker. The reason why David has been acting quite weird is because it's actually Daniel posing as David, giving Daniel a pretty cool comeback as an antagonist. Up to this point, I believed Daniel was only going to be a one-time villain, but I assume due to the fanfare around the character, many wanted him back. So why not make it extra special by putting him in one of your specials? In addition to posing as David, he also kidnapped him and put him in the camp's bunker, so he could properly carry out his revenge on Max by killing him. But they stop him, only for the ending to show that he will eventually come back. And he does. We will talk more about that later though, so keep that in the back of your mind. As I said before, this was an amazing comeback for Daniel, as he kept his threatening aura from season 2. And I loved how the entire episode kept you on your tippy toes to see if Max was crazy or not. Honestly, a pretty good job on the writer's end, especially since this special went on to become my favorite one. Probably because I have a sort of bias for Daniel, but that's whatever. Like, come on, how can you not love this? Alrighty then, let's now talk about season 4. I have the same opinion for season 4 as I have for season 3, though I will admit season 4 is better than season 3, due to the fact that I have fewer least favorite episodes compared to season 3, where I have more least favorite episodes. I think the reason why I liked season 4 more than season 3 is because of Cameron becoming more of a prominent character throughout the season. Up until season 3, Cameron only made brief appearances throughout the show, since his running joke was how funny it was that David was oblivious to his idol being nothing more than a wanted criminal and con man. But now that he's doing 10,000 hours of community service at Camp Campbell, oh boy, are these plots fun as hell. Actually, the first episode of season 4 is a Cameron, David, and Max focused episode, so season 4 was off to a strong start for me. The first episode is named Keep the Change. Haha, that rhymed. Max points out that Campbell will never change and believes that people in general just don't change, which is not true since everyone begins to point out how Max has softened up and changed for the better. This leads Max to go on a mission to prove his point that people can't change by making Cameron go back to his bad old habits again. On the other hand though, David believes that Cameron can change for the better, so he puts in all of his effort into making Cameron do good things, so he can get a so-called step in the right direction. In the middle of the episode, by pure coincidence, Cameron accidentally saves his store from a robbery, and he becomes a hero. He gets rewarded and tells David that he wants to continue to do good things, but only for recognition. So, David is failing pretty hard right now on his end. By the end of the episode, the same robber from the store comes to the camp for some money. But he's not going to hurt anyone, because Max finds out that David hired this robber to give Cameron, as he says, a push, maybe a little nudge. But he caused a lot of suffering, leading everyone to come up with the conclusion that people can change for the better or worse, and that Max and David are sure rubbing off each other, leading them to have this horrendous realization. The cherry on top of the ending is this time the robber pulls out an actual gun so David can pay him for his acting. And that's the episode. This episode was really good throughout his run, as not only did it give us an introduction of how Cameron will be throughout the season, but it also gave David a huge personality change. However, one problem. Despite the episode suggesting that David's behavior worsened, this behavior did not continue for the rest of the season. So, it's kind of disappointing how pointless it was in the end, since this was the only time we ever saw David do something really bad like this. But I digress. Other Cameron-focused episodes that I really loved were episode 11, Campbell Can't Handle the Truth Serum, and episode 16, Panicked Room. In episode 11, the title basically says it all. Campbell drinks a truth serum and it's hard for him to do what he's best known to do: lie. Making the situation worse for him is that he has a few hours before his parole officers check on him, so he's cooked. Since Max does not want him at camp anymore, he helps out by making him do better things without needing to lie to the officers. This episode was pretty funny. Just seeing his futile attempts at getting better was quite hilarious. It even exposed more of the things he feels and did. Another thing to note about this episode is that it has a somewhat heartfelt ending. Once Neil gives Cameron an antidote to the truth serum, he doesn't lie, but instead tells the truth on how he genuinely wants to put in effort, despite him having the urges to go back to his old ways. So, that was pretty nice. On the other hand though, episode 16 gives us a bit of a backstory on Cameron's character, and shows that despite him being a piece of shit, he does have the ability to care for others. In this episode, Cameron is put into a makeshift escape room with his enemy, Miss Priss, the leader of the Girl Scouts. Throughout the episode, we learn more about what happened between the two, as they try to work out their differences on how to even escape in the first place. What we learn is that Miss Priss and Cameron had a steamy romance. Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna stop. But Cameron left her and ghosted her due to fear of commitment. This led to Miss Priss growing resentment towards him, as he left her without zero explanation at the time. Towards the end, it's so funny, because as they are about to solve the escape room, well...
You're right. I was a coward. I'm realizing a lot I don't like about myself, and I'm trying to be better. That includes how I treated you. Which is why I'm ready to officially end this break and jump in where we left off.
Oh, wow, you're serious.
Yeah, despite the dude being a mastermind criminal, he's very stupid, as he's somehow shocked that Miss Priss went out to see other people. Anyways, in the ending, they somewhat rekindle their romance by doing the sexy time. Oh yeah, oh my god. Okay, I'm gonna stop now. And Overall, those are just a few examples of episodes that I love from this season. I also like episodes where we get more creative changes. For example, episode 4, New Adventure, is about Nikki having an adventure with Dolphin Neris instead of with Max and Neil, as she always does. Or episode 6, Follow the Leader, which is an episode focused on the leaders of the trios from the different camps working together to find a lost package for Campbell. Holy shit, that was a lot of words. And I could go on, but you get the point. Season 4 is just way better, in my opinion, when we're talking about the mixed era. But of course, it isn't without its flaws. There are 2 episodes from this season that I utterly despise. First, we will talk about the one I hate the least, since the second one will be saved for last, because I need to prepare to rage for that one. So let's just begin with the first one. Okay. So I mentioned in my season 3 section that Daniel does eventually come back. He comes back in season 4's 9th episode, Camp Loser Says What? In this episode, Camp Campbell finally loses to the Wood Scouts under a new leader. That new leader being Daniel. Now, in the beginning, I thought the episode was a pretty sick idea. There's one issue though. The writing for Daniel is quite disappointing in this episode, as he's not used as much of a threatening force anymore, but more as a joke. Obviously, Daniel was used for comedic effect to show David's obliviousness. But one thing that Colt Camp did very well with Daniel was the rule of show not tell. As even before Max points out he's a cult leader, the audience can already put the pieces together by themselves. And even when Max and his gang find out that Daniel is a cult leader, he doesn't just repeat it. Daniel does his cult-like behavior to show that he's a crazy cultist. In this episode, it's the Wood Scouts who are oblivious to Daniel's plans, since they see him as a good leader to help build the Wood Scouts. But the episode is constantly just the campers pointing out to them that Daniel is a cult leader, and it can get very annoying. The worst part is, it's not even funny, it's just a nuisance. Also, compared to his plans in Colt Camp and the season 3 special, his plan in this one is very weak. He was only using the Wood Scouts to summon his god, of course, but the weirdest thing is, he didn't do his complete brainwashing this time. As we saw, Daniel is very good at brainwashing people, but I guess he forgot to do it with the Wood Scouts or something. What makes it worse is that this would be the last we would see of Daniel, since the campers and the Wood Scouts work together to make him believe he had summoned Seamoog without a sacrifice, and this fake Seamoog just tells him to fuck off and go to Antarctica. Wow, what a great episode! It sucks that this was Daniel's last appearance in Camp, an event you would think would be more eventful, but no. They just lazily rewrote Colt Camp and took all of the things that made it good and then turned it awful and annoying. Alrighty then, let's just get into the worst of the worst. So, just like almost every Camp season up to this point, this season also had specials. The specials that season 4 had were St. Campbell's Day and With Friends Like These. St. Campbell was boring to me. It's not good, and honestly, there isn't much to say about it. The one I have to say a lot about, though, is With Friends Like These. Okay, time to get into some external things, shall we? Camp had a 3-year hiatus after season 4 was released, due to reasons that we will discuss again later. But just understand that the reason why the special is not that good may be due to the fact that it had probably been years since the writers have worked with these characters, and probably because of things happening behind the scenes. To add more context, at the time RoosterTeeth had its 20th anniversary, so they made an event where they would release 20 different episodes for different classic shows that they had. Obviously, Camp was one of those shows. This will help with the argument I'm about to form against this thing later. Another thing to consider was that this special was considered to be the finale for the series. Before we get into the special, I want to mention that at this point, Max, Neris, and Gwen had new voice actors. This is because RoosterTeeth wanted the ethnicities of the characters to align with their voice actors for representation. Hey, that's 100% 100% fine with me, and I don't really care as much, because if you give a new voice actor some time with a character, they could add their own spin to it or make it better than the original voice actor. This wasn't the first time Camp had changed voice actors for a character. Preston's voice actor got changed in season 3, and his new voice actor did really well onwards. There were even times where he was better than the original one. So yeah, I don't really care, but just keep all of this in mind moving forward. Alrighty then, let's get into it. With Friends Like These is one of the worst Camp episodes I have seen. For starters, when I started watching this episode, I noticed that this special had a length of 30 minutes. I get it. It was supposed to be the last episode of Camp at the time, but what doesn't help is that a majority of the first section waste so much fucking time, and the episode feels too slow for Camp's typical pacing. So genuinely, there was like zero reason to make this episode 30 minutes. Alright, let me just get into the plot, if we're even gonna call it that. Max, Neil, and Nikki find out that the other campers are gossiping about them and making fun of them, leading to them having a bit of a crisis about their likability. This is so out of character, since up to I don't know, the entire show, we see that everyone insults or dislikes each other in some form. But despite their conflicts with one another, the campers still enjoy each other's company, something Max had an arc about in the last episode of season 3. Also, why the fuck would Max care about this? This dude insults everyone. He would be the one to care the least about this. So already, we've started out with a bad case of mischaracterization. How lovely. This isn't the only time this happens, by the way, as there is also another plot about David getting into social media. So according to the episode, Campbell left camp because apparently he turned a new leaf. But that's not even close to the case, because as you see, Campbell bought a social media site named Noise and made it awful. Fucking Christ. What was even the point of taking him out if he hadn't even changed completely? And again, since it's been 3 years, I guess the writers forgot that he had to do mandatory community service, but who cares? Who cares, right? Anyway, David is only on social media because he wants to support Campbell, which is super in character for him. Fine. And in old David fashion, he takes things too far due to him wanting to make more friends on the app. He does everything they want and likes whatever they post, no matter how harmful it is. He also starts getting into NFTs and interesting ideologies, to the point where he's ignoring the entire camp and their needs. This made me so angry. David was never known to ignore Camp Campbell like this, and even though he saw Cameron as his idol, there were many times he would go against him for the sake of the camp and the kids, because that was one of the things that made his character likable, that he would never abandon the camp under any circumstance. And sure, of course, he was oblivious to things, but David wasn't completely stupid or brain dead, like this episode for some reason made him. I wish the writers had not created these stupid plots in the first 15 minutes. What doesn't help is that none of these things are even relevant to the ending. So yes, this episode wastes 15 minutes of your time. You might as well skip the first half of it. Whose idea was this? Oh my god. Okay, let me just explain the other half of this episode. So everyone learns their lesson about likability and whatever, until Gwen mentions that it's the last day of summer camp. According to David, that means it's time to do the So Long summer celebration. A nice thing about this tradition is that the kids can do whatever they want and can represent their time at camp in whatever form or medium they like. Now, why didn't the episode just start with this instead of the first half? Starting with this plot would have saved so much time and probably would have made the length of the episode way shorter. Not just that, a plot like this is a much more meaningful finale than whatever the first half was. This is exactly what I meant when I said this episode has no plot. It didn't know what it wanted to be. Continuing on, the The only people who are not as happy about this are Max and David, as Gwen discovered she gained new job opportunities, and Max had to realize that all the fun he had was coming to an end, which is a huge change for the both of them. They go on a hike, and David gives a touching lecture to Max. David asks Max if he knows what he likes about sunsets, and Max, as always, assumes that he's going to say something generically positive about it. Max points out that he doesn't believe in such a thing, since he's always going to look out for the bad, while David is just always going to look out for the good. So what's the point if both of them are right? But that's not true, as David points out that both of them are wrong. Tomorrow can be a good or bad day, or it can be full of surprises, just like how Max one day hated Camp Campbell and then went on to love it in the end. It's here where he tells Max that Gwen is leaving, and that if he can't find someone else, well, one day he may have to close the camp. But even if that day comes, at least he made a lot of memories to walk away with. Something that he wants to do for all the campers. Now, this scene is beautiful, as it's not only nice and quiet, but we see the rational, soft side of David again. I also love how the animation is done here, as the sun setting adds more emotion to the scene. It also makes things poetic that this scene ends with the sun going down, especially since the start of the scene was about David talking about sunsets. Honestly, it's this scene that makes this episode so frustrating, as this episode had a lot of potential to make something more heartfelt. But no, instead it needed to put in all this slop for no reason at all. The tone changes as, in the usual camp style, chaos ensues, as Neil makes an insane robot that terrorizes the camp. David stops it, the robot falls in the water, explodes, and turns into fireworks, leaving a pretty nice mark on Camp Campbell. The episode shows a slideshow of what the campers did on their last days until the final day comes, and everyone says their goodbyes. Everyone leaves, and the episode ends. As you can probably tell, that felt like 2 episodes in one, which was a huge issue for me. If these were 2 separate episodes or specials, I wouldn't have minded, but the fact that these plots are 1 episode makes no sense. Again, this episode would have been perfect if they just scrapped the first part and made the entire episode the last part, allowing the audience to have a more impactful finale for them. Also, the new voice actors for Max and Daenerys and Gwen are not that bad. Max still has his condescending voice, but this time it does actually sound like he's 10 instead of a teen like the original voice actor. This isn't to say Max's original voice actor was bad. I mean, he was super iconic, but come on, the dude did not sound like he was a kid. Daenerys sounds a bit more high-pitched, and Gwen sounds a bit more optimistic compared to her original voice actor at times, to the point where the optimistic voice may not match the mean attitude she is feeling at the moment. Despite the issues I have with the voices, I did not mind them much, since I believe that if the actors had more time with the characters in later episodes, they probably could have gotten better like Preston's voice actor, or added their spin to it, but as we will see, that never came to fruition. But you get the point by now. This episode fucking sucks, and things only go downhill from here. There isn't much to say about Season 5. It's just a really bad season. So, yes, there was obviously a finale. You might wonder, why make a season 5 if you ended the show? Well, I'm going to be honest, but season 5 feels more like a soft reboot rather than a complete continuation, as the characters have grown and changed since the last time they were at summer camp, which can make for some pretty interesting plots and new dynamics, which they do take advantage of. It's just unfortunate that the execution of these things is complete ass. For starters, these episodes feel very slow in terms of pacing, making this season a slog to go through. And while these plots can be quite funny and interesting, it doesn't help that the comedy feels limited or at times can be a bit predictable. For example, in episode 3, The Talk, Neris finds an old diary in one of the former Flower Scout houses and falls in love with its writer. The moment she picked up that diary, I already knew the writer was going to be someone from the past or someone who had left the Flower Scouts a long time ago. And boom, I was correct. Turns out the writer was from the 80s. As for the other characters, well, they are your usual selves, but Gwen became like a one-note journalist, and that's about it. Season 5 also introduced a new character named CJ. He is Cameron's son, and I mean, he's pretty okay. Kinda like his father, he's only somewhat there for his own interests. What makes CJ refreshing too is that he's more open about his criminal activity. For example, in the first episode, he said he would give a heads up to the campers when he was going to financially exploit them, something that the campers really liked. And like his dad, he's not very smart either and believes in stupid shit. But it makes it funny because he genuinely thinks he sounds smart when he's not, especially since he's on that alpha sigma grind set. I like that he's much more upfront about his criminal activity, and at times he can be better than Campbell at doing his business stuff. In episode 1, he mentions to Max that he stole a startup tech company from his father, sold it, and took the funds to purchase an interest at Camp Campbell. Now, compared to Cameron, CJ is more caring about the camp since he's more attentive to it. However, since he's just there to make a profit like his dad, he doesn't care much about the well-being of the campers. But even though he still has those tendencies like his father, he too has a soft side, since he can give some pretty deep talks. That is, only if he's high though. Now, it's unfortunate because CJ had some potential, but sadly, season 5 had only 4 episodes. Yes, you heard me correctly. Season 5 ended in episode 4, marking the end of Camp, making this season the worst season in the entire series. If you were a fan of Rooster Teeth at the time, you probably already know what happened next. But for those who don't know, in the middle of Camp airing its 5th season, Rooster Teeth shut down. And it was pretty insane because right after episode 1 of season 5 aired, just a few days later, Rooster Teeth announced it would shut down. Alrighty then, let's finally talk about what led to Camp's downfall and external things that happened to the show behind the scenes. Okay, as I said before, Camp did not have a downfall in terms of complete quality. I mean, yeah, season 5 was quite awful, but it wasn't the fault of the people making Camp. It had a downfall because greedy people kept fucking it over. By season 3, Camp had lost most of its fan base. Now, who could be the culprit of this loss of It was Rooster Teeth. It was Rooster Teeth. Now this section will only be focused on how Rooster Teeth kept fucking over Camp. If you want to learn more about what led to Rooster Teeth's downfall, I highly recommend you go and watch June King's video on the topic. It's informative, entertaining, and gives you the full scope of everything that went down behind the scenes. Alright, let's get into it. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I stopped watching Camp at season 3 because I had trouble accessing it due to what Rooster Teeth was doing to it. So, for starters, the first episode of season 3 came out on YouTube. As a Camp fan at the time, I had believed that the other episodes would be uploaded on YouTube. But then, my younger self tried to find more episodes, as I had familiarized myself with the weekly schedule from the last season. New episodes every Saturday. But they weren't there. All of them were on Rooster Teeth's website. A website I abhorred when I tried to watch new episodes. The website was buggy. It had way too many ads, and the UI was extremely confusing for me at the time. So I just gave up on Camp because genuinely I was so used to watching it on YouTube. And if the website sucks balls, what's even the point of putting myself through all that suffering? And also, due to the many ads, I was led to believe that the website was somewhat of a scam. Look, I get needing ads to make money, but did they really need to put ads every few seconds just so I could peacefully watch my show? That's dumb. And I wasn't the only one. If you go on the r/RoosterTeeth subreddit, you can find so many posts about people complaining about the website from years back. Another thing that RoosterTeeth had at the time was the first premium membership, a service that allowed paid members to get RoosterTeeth content one day before or a week before the original release of the episode. During season 2, RoosterTeeth would release Camp episodes for first members a week before they were released on YouTube and their site, which is really nice. It made Camp gain a much wider audience on YouTube. Therefore, it could create new Rooster Teeth fans and maybe new paying members. A smart strategy, right? Well, fuck that, because the entirety of season 3 was only on their website in 2018. It wasn't until a year later that Rooster Teeth released season 3 on YouTube in 2019. This is so fucking stupid, dude. The only explanation I could give for them doing this is obviously greed. Well, that's too bad for them, because this strategy is not even profitable, because the damage had been somewhat done. Once season 3 was released a year later, people had already lost interest, especially the general audience like me, who relied on the show being on YouTube. And this did not stop there. Season 4 got fucked over because number 1, the episodes were never released on YouTube, and number 2, Rooster Teeth barely advertised season 4. As I did my research for this video, I would come to find out that general audiences and people who were Camp fans had no idea that Camp had a season 4 until last year. It's because they never promoted it. What a very smart company, guys. We love this company. We love Rooster Teeth. Oh my god. Also, 2018 to 2019 were some really bad years for Rooster Teeth. Before I get into things, for legal reasons, everything I say from here on out is an allegation. Please keep that in mind as I go through things. In 2019, many allegations came out that Rooster Teeth was making their animators go through hell. They had too much crunch, no paid overtime, and made their animators work 70 to 80 hours a week, allegedly. What also doesn't help is that, according to the allegations, management at the company barely had experience running animated productions, and that's just barely scratching the surface. Another event happening around 2017 to 2018 was the production of Rooster Teeth's new mecha show, Genlock. Around this time, Rooster Teeth had a limited lack of funds due to being owned by Fullscreen, which had a hierarchy of other companies that owned them. At the time, Gray Haddock, the creator of Genlock, also ran the entire animation department, despite him having zero experience to run such a department. Knowing Rooster Teeth, this just led to an unfortunate series of events. Around this time, another show named Nomad of Nowhere was also in production, but just like the other animated productions Rooster Teeth had at the time, they also got fucked. This dude wanted his project to come to life so badly that he was taking away resources from Nomad of Nowhere, causing it to get an abrupt end. Ruby, another popular show, also had talent taken away from it, an awful thing to do after a terribly received season. If the head of animation was even taking away talent from Ruby, Rooster Teeth's top, it's like they're Mickey Mouse, then who's to say that Camp didn't suffer the same fate? And it's not just taking away the resources, but putting your animators under such conditions is just a recipe for disaster. Making things worse was that in 2023, Rooster Teeth took every show they had made on YouTube, including Camp, and moved them all onto their website, because YouTube revenue wasn't making enough money for them anymore. Now, I do understand this this sentiment as a YouTuber myself. YouTube can't completely sustain animation. You also need to sell merch or make other means of monetary gain to get your shows funded. But this was also so dumb, as not only would their shows get less exposure, their shows would also get less people to discover them, therefore leading to their shows to die out. What also made it worse was the website was still absolute shit. So yeah, no wonder why this failed. This is also probably why season 5 was of awful quality and came back in 2024, so they could bring back old fans to the Rooster Teeth website. But at this point, it was already way too late, and the Camp fanbase had already moved on. It doesn't help that at this time, there was already so much more competition in terms of indie animation. Nowadays, since the website doesn't exist anymore, Camp is put behind a paywall on YouTube, or you could just watch it for free on Tubi or Amazon Prime with obviously a Prime subscription. Yeah, it seems like Warner Bros. Discovery, the company who ended up with Rooster Teeth's properties, did not give a fuck about this show, so they just dumped it on streaming services to add more content or make the little money they can from it. However, don't worry, there is still some hope for Camp. On February 5th of this year, it was announced that Rooster Teeth's former co-founder, Bernie Burns, used his company, Box Canyon Productions, to buy the Rooster Teeth brand and all of its remaining assets, which includes its social media channels and websites, with plans to reboot some of their classic shows. Now, there is no specification if Burns wants to bring Camp back, so I can't confirm that. For now, Camp is just stuck on limbo, with no indication that it will come back. And if it doesn't, that's okay for me. Don't get me wrong, I would love more Camp content, but after watching season 5, I would be super wary if Camp ever came back again. Yes, I saw some potential in that season, but it only had more flaws than good things, which is why I rated it as the worst season. And also after Clone High, I am now incredibly wary about old shows getting rebooted or coming back, especially with the way the animation industry is right now. The only way I would support a continuation of Camp is if they brought on some pretty good writers, you know, not the writers from season 5, but people who really care about the Camp show. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think we should appreciate Camp for what it already is. It's an amazing show that just kept getting screwed over by bad actors and awful external issues, which is why I appreciate it even more, because I could imagine that the people who worked on it fought tooth and nail to keep Camp running, and I think that shows how much passion the creators had for it. If you have not seen Camp yet, I highly recommend it. You will find something to love about it, whether it be its writing, characters, or comedy, which makes it so great. After this retrospective, a lot of the episodes will stay with me as good memories, which makes me so happy that Camp had a huge impact on me like that. And heck, even though the fanbase isn't as large today as it was in 2016 to 2017, it still has a dedicated fanbase, to the point where people continue to create really good fan content for this show till this very day, and that's beautiful. And that just goes to show you how much this show had an impact on others and the entire internet. So if you haven't seen Camp, what are you doing? Go watch it! If you have made it through the end of this video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. This video was incredibly fun to make, but it was also my hardest video to make, due to the fact that most of Camp essentially got wiped off the internet. And not just the show itself, soundtracks and trailers also got wiped off. Most of the stuff you saw in this video was found through archives, so please appreciate the people who put in the effort to archive all of Camp's stuff, because without them, this video would not have been possible. I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it, whether it be nostalgia or discovering something new. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. and make sure to have a good day and night. Bye bye!